With Pedro Pascal making some of the worst decisions during the press tour for Fantastic Four, one major development going on now involves how he yet again attacked fans and said some of the most offensive things yet toward Marvel fans.
$1 million mark, which would be a loss for Marvel. It would be a flop for Marvel. It would be a failure for Marvel. That's what we're looking at when it comes to Fantastic Four at the box office. And the reason this is important is, yes, because it was their last chance to deliver a hit this year.
One major obstacle that Disney and Marvel are dealing with right now has a lot to do with the press tour, specifically with Pedro Pascal getting overly political and saying some of the most cringe-worthy things out there that's really just sabotaging the entire process of promoting the film.
Pedro Pascal didn't see this coming. Not the headlines, not the backlash, and definitely not the brutal crash at the box office. Fantastic Four was supposed to be Marvel's redemption arc, the film that proved they still had the magic. But instead, it became yet another flop in a growing graveyard of MCU failures. And now, fans aren't just disappointed, they've completely given up. After years of hype, rewrites, and reshoots, this reboot launched with what some called a respectable weekend. But insiders knew better. The early numbers were soft, and the buzz was lukewarm at best.
Really have the Fantastic Four off in the Baxter building or off on this mission away from everyone else. They just feel like they're just them being them together for a huge chunk of the movie. That even kind of shapes the way that like Johnny Storm becomes characterized, to where he's, typically a little bit more of, the flashy guy that loves being in the spotlight. He's the daredevil, he's the womanizer.
Within days, the box office took a nosedive, a crushing 66% drop by week 2. And just like that, Marvel's big comeback was dead on arrival. For Pedro Pascal, who once carried entire franchises on his back, this was a harsh reality check. Online, fans pointed fingers. Some blamed his casting. Others said it wasn't his fault, that Marvel poisoned the well years ago. Either way, the message was clear. Nobody cares anymore. How did it come to this? How did the most trusted name in entertainment turn into a punchline? And is there any way Marvel can crawl out of this hole before Avengers Doomsday makes things even worse? Let's break down how Pedro got caught in the crossfire of one of the biggest cinematic collapses in Marvel history.
They're just really beginning to actually have a lot of Marvel fatigue and Pedro Pascal fatigue. That is very much real. And like I said earlier, his politics, his overall view on activism, it is not helping at all in the least when it comes down to Marvel and Disney. And the fact that Marvel and Disney allows him to go on that train wreck of viewing, of course, or spewing his politics into the public eye, it goes to show you that they really don't care at all.
And why fans are finally saying enough is enough. At this point, 2025 isn't just a bad year for Marvel. It's a warning sign, a flashing red light that even their most loyal fans can't ignore anymore. One after another, the studio's releases have dropped like dominoes, each one trying to pretend the last disaster didn't happen. But by now, the pattern's impossible to hide. Captain America: Brave New World was supposed to reignite the franchise. It didn't. Instead, it opened with a whimper and faded faster than expected.
Bob Iger is now having issues with Pedro Pascal. Just days ago, they already punished Pascal by reducing his press tour appearances and urging him to stop and cut it out with his politics. However, now Bob Iger took action against Pedro in the most unexpected way possible, where he canceled an entire featurette for Fantastic Four that was filmed, focusing strictly on Pedro as Reed Richards.
Then came Thunderbolts, riding the same team-up formula Marvel once mastered. That flopped too. The openings were weak, the second wow. Drops were brutal, and neither film made it close to breaking even. Each new release brought more questions. Are the stories stale? Is the cast out of touch? Or have audiences just moved on? The truth? It's a bit of everything. The trust Marvel built over a decade has been shattered by rushed scripts, forced messaging, and projects that feel more like obligations than events. By the time Fantastic Four hit theaters, fans weren't excited. They were skeptical. Some were even hostile. The idea of showing up on opening weekend for another, maybe it's good, Marvel film felt more like a risk than a reward. That shift in mindset is the real damage. Because once your audience stops believing in you, the box office starts to show it.
Weekend, it looked like a 55 to 60% drop, which wouldn't have meant complete and total disaster, but it wouldn't have been the great hold that it needed. Well, it was way worse than that. Box office, Fantastic Four craters by 66% in its second weekend. And yes, indeed, $40 million in its second weekend in the box office, good enough for...
Marvel treated Fantastic Four like their last chance to save the year, and maybe the franchise. The marketing pushed hard. The cast was stacked. The studio hyped it as the film that would bring the MCU back to form. But when opening weekend came, the response was muted. Yes, it technically did better than Brave New World and Thunderbolts, but that's not saying much when those films flopped. Instead of blowing expectations out of the water, Fantastic Four barely cleared the low bar set by Marvel's recent misfires. No long lines, no packed theaters, just a lot of cautious optimism that fizzled into apathy by Sunday night. The film wasn't terrible. Critics gave it a lukewarm pass, with many calling it decent, watchable.
66% drop. Now look, when something like, I don't know, Spider-Man No Way Home opens to like $300 million domestically and has a 68% drop and makes almost $100 million in its second weekend, you can kind of see a massive opening, a pretty big drop-off, but that's because of how big the opening was. This isn't one of those stories. This is one of those...
Or even the best Marvel movie in years. But that praise came with an asterisk. Best in years means nothing when the last few years were Love and Thunder, Multiverse of Madness, and the Marvels. That's not a compliment. It's a cry for help. Audiences could smell the mid-tier energy from a mile away. Instead of excitement, there was hesitation. Instead of buzz, there was doubt. And when the numbers rolled in, it was clear. This wasn't a comeback. It was just another placeholder. And fans are done showing up for placeholders. If Marvel was hoping for a second-week miracle, what they got instead was a complete collapse. Just 7 days after its underwhelming debut, Fantastic Four plummeted by 66% at the box office. Not a soft dip, not a normal drop, a full-on crater, the kind that signals a total loss of momentum. Now, to be clear, big-budget films often drop in their second weekend, but context matters. When Spider-Man No Way Home dropped 68%, it was after a record-breaking $300 million opening. Fantastic Four didn't have that kind of cushion. It stumbled out of the gate and then fell flat on its face. This kind of drop puts it in the same embarrassing tier as Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania and Brave New World, films that opened soft and collapsed harder. For Marvel, it's becoming the new normal. The hype burns out fast, and the general public just doesn't stick around anymore. And that's not just about the movies. It's about trust. A 66% fall tells you one thing loud and clear. One is recommending this film. Word of mouth didn't carry it. Casual fans didn't show up late. There was no second wave, just a vanishing audience and a marketing machine that couldn't save it. This wasn't just a bad drop. It was a warning shot Marvel should have seen coming. Marvel used to mean something. It stood for big, bold storytelling, iconic characters, and unforgettable cinematic moments. Now, it's become a bloated brand that doesn't even know what it's selling anymore. Heroes come and go, timelines overlap, and fans are left trying to figure out if a movie matters or if it's just set up for another Disney Plus series no one asked for. The heart of the problem? Marvel doesn't have an identity anymore. After Endgame, the studio scrambled to fill the void with volume instead of vision. New characters were rushed in. Old ones were awkwardly reworked. And instead of crafting cohesive stories, Marvel pushed out content just to stay relevant. That strategy backfired. Audiences aren't Dumb. They noticed the decline. Each mid-tier movie chipped away at the brand. She-Hulk, Ironheart, Secret Invasion, The Marvels, none of them landed. And now, when a film like Fantastic Four finally tries to course correct, no one cares. The damage is done. The worst part? Marvel keeps acting like nothing's wrong. They treat every slop like a fluke, blaming fan fatigue instead of taking accountability. But this isn't just fatigue, it's rejection. Fans are tired. They're over it. And unless Marvel finds a new identity fast, they're not coming back. With each box office disaster, Marvel seems more focused on blaming fans than fixing the actual problem. Instead of owning the misfires, the narrative from certain voices has become painfully predictable. It's the audience's fault. They're too toxic, too tired, or just not smart enough to get it. Seriously? After Fantastic Four tanked, some defenders in the industry tried to spin it, saying the film underperformed because fans are burnt out or don't want smart storytelling. Others even dragged Pedro Pascal into it, claiming his star power should have carried the movie. And if it didn't, that's somehow a fan issue. But let's be real, fans aren't the problem. They showed up for over a decade, supported the franchise through 20-plus films, and turned Marvel into a cultural juggernaut. They didn't suddenly stop caring. Marvel stopped delivering. That's the difference. Creators like Gary from Nerdrotic fired back hard at the blame game, calling it out for what it is: deflection. The truth hurts. Marvel's own decisions led them here. Bloated releases, confusing plots, forgettable villains, and a constant stream of half-baked Disney Plus shows. Fans didn't walk away for no reason. They were pushed. And if Marvel doesn't stop pointing fingers and start taking accountability, there won't be many fans left to blame next time. This wasn't just another movie. Fantastic Four was supposed to be the reset, a clean slate, a chance to bring back one of Marvel's most iconic teams and finally steer the MCU in a better direction. But instead of a bold return, what fans got was average. And average just doesn't cut it anymore. Critics didn't tear it apart. In fact, many said it was better than expected. But that only highlights the problem. Expectations were already on the floor. A 6 out of 10 isn't a win. It's a sigh of relief that it wasn't worse. For a franchise reboot with this much history and hype, not terrible is just another form of failure. The cast? Mixed reactions. Pedro Pascal, usually a fan favorite, felt out of place to many. Not terrible, not great, just there. And when you're rebooting a cornerstone like Fantastic Four, just there isn't enough. This was Marvel's moment to spark excitement, prove they still had it. Instead, they played it safe and lost. It had potential. That's what stings the most. The pieces were there. A decent script, stronger direction, and just enough cha to be something more. But Marvel didn't push. They didn't take risks. And in the end, they delivered a product that no one hated, but no one loved either. And when indifference replaces hype, even legacy can't save you. Marvel fans aren't just tired, they're done. After being promised the next big saga post-Endgame, what they got instead was a flood of filler. Too many shows, too many mid-tier movies, and zero payoff. From She-Hulk to Secret Invasion, it felt less like a connected universe and more like a checklist of content. The trust is gone. Audiences used to show up because they believed the ride was worth it. Now, they're asking if it's worth the ticket price. And more often than not, the answer is no. Fans gave Marvel a decade of loyalty, and Marvel gave them homework, confusion, and disappointment in return. Even decent films like Fantastic Four can't escape the shadow of past failures. Because once that trust is broken, every new release has to earn its audience. And now, Marvel hasn't earned anything. Avengers Doomsday was supposed to be the comeback, the event that brought fans racing back to theaters. But if Fantastic Four was meant to build momentum, it did the opposite. It showed that even one of Marvel's biggest legacy teams can't revive interest. This flop casts a massive shadow over Doomsday. If audiences didn't care about the setup, why would they care about the payoff? Right now, there's no hype, no confidence, and no clear reason to believe Doomsday will be different. Worse, the name itself feels ironic, because if Marvel doesn't radically shift course, Doomsday might not just be the title. It could mark the end of the MCU's dominance altogether. If Fantastic Four couldn't save Marvel, what can? That's the question echoing across the fandom right now, and no one seems to have a good answer. Not even Marvel. Pedro Pascal's name wasn't enough. A legacy team wasn't enough. And Avengers Doomsday follows this same path. It won't just be another flop. It'll be the moment fans officially walk away. Because when people stop hoping for a comeback, they stop watching altogether. And right now, that hope is hanging by a thread.